Welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts. And after probably about 3 years, I finally got around to shorten the longest intro. I think I've taken about 50% of the time off, down to about a minute and a half. And so we're going to do some more information today. And part of it, one of the reasons why I shortened the info was over the last couple of weeks up in Concord, sitting in some of these committee hearings as I've seen John P. Q. Public, Mr. and Mrs. Q. Public coming in, and I can just hear the pain in their voice, watch the pain on their face. They're hurting. They're really, really hurting. They're asking for help. But what I've seen and heard over and over again is they really don't have much information. They've given bits and pieces of information, and that information has sent them down the wrong road. And and part of it's facts, and it's kind of like explain what a fact is. And a fact by itself really isn't worth really much. I can go and say it's 28 degrees outside right now, but it's 28 degrees, and the fact, that would be a fact, but that would be totally true. But it's 28 degrees cold or warm. And what happens is when you take facts, you have to take a cluster of facts, or you have to take them in context to really come up with the true meaning of that fact. And we as politicians have found a way to use a fact to basically lie, to use a fact to manipulate the people, because a fact by itself really has no value. And sitting up at Concord the last 2 weeks, and yes, it's friendlier and it's nicer, but what is the end result? Is the end result different? And it's one of those, if someone is going to punish you by being nice to you, they're going to be nice as they punish you, or someone is going to be mean to you as they punish. In the end, you're still being punished. And so, and what's been happening at Concord, it kind of reminds me of the old movie, The Clash of the Titans, where you have Zeus and Hera and the gods and the demigods all sitting up on Mount Olympus, and they have this big bowl and they're looking down on earth, and it's kind of like saying, you know what, let's have a little bit of fun today. Let's do this to that person or do this to that person, and basically creating, giving the people the impression or the idea that they're really hopeless. They really have very little control over what they can do in their day-to-day lives. Their future isn't, as they would say, in the hands of the gods, not their own hands. And so that what I found was really frustrating up at Concord. And I don't want to admit it, but as I'm looking more and more up at Concord, it isn't about you, the public. It's really about us, because there's 400 of us at the House. We can go up there, and we know a fact is, for example, that New Hampshire has the lowest paid state reps, which is true. Okay, but they say New Hampshire has the most represents per population. That is true. But they can go and say, well, New Hampshire is the most representative elected body in the country. And that would not be a fact, because in New Hampshire, like for example, I'm no spring chicken, but I think I'm the only individual from Keene that's not collected up in the State House that's not collecting Social Security. And if I go look at the makeup of the House, the great majority of the people are collecting Social Security. And so when you look at the people that are up at the House, they don't represent the average person in New Hampshire. They're just not. And so you had two facts, and because you took two facts, you can't naturally assume that the third one would be correct, because it isn't. The other part up at the State House is because if you're an average person, middle-class person working, the chances of you be able to go up to the State House, I'm on municipality and county government, I have to go 3 days a week. And so to go for 8 or 9 weeks, 3 days a week, even if you have your own business, you're going to be hurting. If you're working for someplace, you're not going to be able to do it. If you're a policeman or a fireman, you can rearrange your schedule to do it. But for the average person, it just isn't going to happen. And so what's happened, what I've seen more and more up at the State House, is people are running and getting elected for their own personal agenda. And it's like, if I wanted to, I can say, you know what, I'm going to go run to the State House, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do things that I want. I'm going to go and say, this is how I think people should live. This is how I think what people should eat or drink or smoke, or basically. So 400 of us can all go up there with personal or party agendas, and the other 1.3 million people in the state of New Hampshire has to go along with us. And so when you go and see the massive number of lobbyists, I think there's more lobbyists than there are state reps. When you see how cozy a lot of state reps are with the lobbyists, or if they're not cozy with the lobbyists, how many of them are beholden to the get that thing out, the party leaders. When you look at the license plates, I'm assistant number 1, assistant number 2, assistant number 3, and I think I saw one license plate last week, assistant number 7. Okay, assistant number 7. So I'm the assistant majority leader, and but there's 7 assistants to the majority leader. That's an awful lot of assistants. So when you go in and you look at chairman, excuse me, vice chair, assistants, and floor leaders and assistant floor leaders, and then the special parking spots that come with them. That's what's more important, not us, the public. It's those seats, those parking spots, those special plates that are important. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. Basically, in a lot of cases, up at the State House, it's about I, and a group of I is really, really small. To give you an example, one individual knew a friend, quote unquote, and brought in as a retired Army colonel. And the retired Army colonel had said, you know what, I'm disabled, and I don't think I should have to pay any property tax whatsoever on my property. So an individual submitted a bill that would say, at the bare minimum, a person would, a veteran who's totally disabled, would not have to pay at least 50% of his or her property tax, or in some cases, none of their property taxes. And so, when I was asking questions, one town, they had 13 people in that category. Those 13 people owned $3.6 million worth of property. One of them was a retired major general, and 2 were 2 brigadier generals. Okay? And those 13 people, they were in a small town, and a lower tax rate town, was over $63,000 of additional tax breaks if they would have got the 50% off. And is that looking out for the people of New Hampshire, or is that looking out for a little small group? Another individual, a senior officer retired, who's getting the $2,000 tax break, had someone submit a bill, one part of Democratic leadership, to submit a bill that would not allow the city clerk to publish the name or the can't think of the individual's name, the tax assessor to publish the names of the individuals that were getting the $2,000 tax credit for being disabled. And, well, wait a minute, if you want the disability, you got to go and apply for it. You got to come up with documentation. And what happens if the city council or the town selectmen approve it, everyone else in the town has to pay extra for that. So the people of that town or that city is paying for to pay for that veterans tax credit. And so if the city, to me, if the town the people in the town or the people in the city are paying for those veterans tax credits, whether it's the veterans disability or the regular veterans, they should have a right to know who's getting the tax credit, who they are paying extra property taxes to give the veterans the tax credit. None of this saying, well, nope, what we want to do is that list really has to be secret, or if it's not totally secret, be really hard for anybody to get. Again, well, part of it, chances are, one of the individuals that was getting the tax credit, someone probably questioned whether he or she earned or was eligible for the tax credit. And, excuse me, because one of the things with the VA, you have to recertify every 5 years. And just because you get 100% unemployability or 100% totally right now, that could change in 2 or 3 years. So some towns forget about it, the recertification. Keene is really good at it. And all of a sudden someone is collecting a $2,000 tax break that he or she doesn't deserve. And so those are some of the things that are just going on there, and it's unbelievably frustrating to watch people going up there talking about how they really care about the people, or how they really care about educating the kids in state of New Hampshire. They don't. I was talking on one bill, and there was a doctor, a PhD from the New Hampshire Department of Education, and she was specifically asked twice, what about the equality for students? And he says, yes, the quality of students. And her reply was, home rule trumps the quality, equality, and equal quality of opportunity, not equal outcome or whatever. And it's saying here it is, Department of Education officials saying, as far as she was concerned and the Department of Education was concerned, home rule will always out-trump the equality of opportunity for students in New Hampshire, which would mean that wherever your zip code is, if you got the wrong one, don't count on a good education, you have no right in the state of New Hampshire to have the equality of opportunity, because home rule trumps. And that's what we do up at the State House. Anytime that we don't want something, we just go and say home rule, home rule, home rule. But anytime you want, a community wants to do something, for example, like Keene was involved in ICLEI, they would go and say, nope, no home rule, no home rule, you don't know what you're talking about. We can't trust you with home rule. Or for example, when Keene outlawed cigarette smoking in restaurants, they go, nope, no home rule. Or last year, after that fire that was up there that destroyed the house 2 years ago, and we wanted to put sprinkler system or some type of fire control system for individuals who are building homes way out in the boondocks, they passed a law that prevented us from home rule. So that's what we do up in New Hampshire. We pick and choose. If we want to have quality education, we say no home rule because all we want is adequate education. But different picks and choice. We go back and forth, back and forth. Home rule, not home rule, home rule, not home rule. That's the way we play the game. That's how, that's the frustrating part up in Concord. It's not about us. It's about each one of the parties maintaining their control. And if you go back and look over the last 10 years, I've been up in Concord in 8 years, the leadership, right now it's Norelli and Gene Chandler, and basically it was Gene Chandler and Norelli. The leadership really changes. It's the same clique on both sides. Yes, you had O'Brien that came in for a little while, but there's really the same clique, and it just switches back and forth, back and forth. And so in a lot of ways, people up at Concord are more worried about maintaining, quote, their leadership positions or their place on the hierarchy than actually doing what's best for the state of New Hampshire. And I think as a result, the state of New Hampshire is suffering drastically. And so what I'm going to do is go over to finish up what I was doing last week on the New Hampshire retirement system before I ran out of time. And and so this is going to be an example of where you can use a fact, and a fact by itself will look pretty negative until you put them all together in context. Right now in New Hampshire, we've got employees. Employees are plow drivers, truck drivers, janitors, you name it. They all get clumped into that group. And right now there's 24,747 people, employees actually working in the state of New Hampshire at all the levels that are contributing into the retirement fund. Right now, there's 14,141 employees who are retired and who are now collecting a retirement check from the state of New Hampshire. So when you look at the employee, there's 1.75 people working right now to pay for every person that's retired. Teachers, I spelled that wrong. Teachers, there's 18,161 teachers, 9,956 retired. So 1.82 teachers for everyone that's collecting a retirement check. Police, there's 4,118 working, paying into the system right now, 2,981 who are collecting a retirement check, or 1.38 teachers for everyone, working for everyone that's collecting a retirement check. The fire department, 1,599. And there is that are paying into the system, 1,376, or basically 1.16 firemen working for everyone who's paying into the retirement. Well, when you go and look back over what's happened over the last couple of years, maybe the last 6 years, as we're trying to balance out the retirement fund, you'll see in a lot of cases the firemen are the most vocal, and they have one of they're actually the smallest group. The one that gets all the bad press is really the police, because the police have been known to spike and get a lot of those extra details on those last 3 years. We've had examples of police retiring and getting paid more than they were when they were working full time, because when they throw in the unused sick time, the unused vacation time, and sometimes they used to throw in car allowance and a whole bunch of other stuff. A lot of that's changed, but again, that's a small group. And what we do is we talk about how lavish retirement checks that the state employees get. So again, you can see a police officer, a police chief, or a police captain getting 80, 90, 100,000 as a retirement check. But those are the rare guys. Those are the guys that you get to go and to see. They're out there. But when you go in and look, the average retirement check for an employee in the state of New Hampshire is $12,259. Teachers, $21,320. Police, $34,731. And fire, $36,461. An average of, basically the average yearly retirement is $19,119. Now what we'll do is to make some of the numbers we'll go what I'm going to do is for employee 30,000, which is a little bit less than $15 an hour, teachers 50, police 60, fire 60. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this over a 30-year career, and I'm just going to use this as an average. And these are all fluctuate depending on where you work in the state of New Hampshire. But this is what I'm going to do for the ease. So that one would make 900,000. 1.5 million, 1.8 million over 30 years. Okay. But what happens is the employee has to pay 7%. 7%. Would I have this? 11.55 and 11.8. So what will happen is the employee will pay $63,000. The teacher $105,000. So over the 30-year career, an employee will have to pay $63,000 out of their paycheck into the New Hampshire Retirement Fund. The teacher $105, the police $207, and the fireman $212. Okay. These are facts, but I'm going to show you how we can distort this if I don't give you the whole information. Well, police and firemen don't pay into Social Security. So they would pay 6.2 less, and that 6.2 less is basically the equivalent about $111,000 that they would have had to pay into Social Security. So when you take that out, 101 and basically 96,000. So when you go in and compare the difference, because when you look at a teacher paying Social Security and the policeman and the fireman, when you deduct the Social Security portion of it, they will actually pay less into the retirement fund than the teacher would be. And so that will go and make up a difference when you go later on and we go and show that the difference between where a teacher gets $21,000 and the police gets $34,000, that will be made up in Social Security. Okay, now for each employee, each teacher, policeman and fireman, this is what the taxpayer, the town, is going to have to pay over and above this amount. So if this individual is working in Keene, the city of Keene would have to pay $96,000 $930, or combined it would be $159,000. For a teacher, $212,000, or a combined $317,000. A policeman, $454,000, or a combined $663,000. And a fireman, $499,000, for a combined of $712,000. So what happens is when you then go look at the thing between a fireman making $60,000 average, or $1.8 million over a 30-year career, between his 212 and the city's $500,000, basically they have to pay combined $712,000 into the New Hampshire Retirement Fund. So, but again, the key right here is you minus 222K, minus 222K, because while the fireman doesn't have to pay $111,000, the city does not have to pay a $111,000 match into Social Security. So basically, this brings it down to $490, and this brings it down to about $440K. Okay, but it does not prevent a policeman or a fireman from collecting Social Security, because a lot of them, because they retire at 55, or they'll find ways to work on the side or whatever, so they'll be able to qualify for Social Security when they turn 65 or 66. Okay, so when you go and look at the retirement for the employee who gets $12,000 a year for retirement, that is payback without interest is 13 years. Teacher is 14.9. Police is 19.1. And fireman is 19.5. So, while the numbers may look big and you look in the payouts, okay, without any interest whatsoever, between the combination of what the city pays in and what the individual pays in for a fireman, the fireman basically, if he retires, it collects his first retirement check at 55. He then has to go to 75 to break even between his and the city's contribution. And where the ones that it's the quickest payoff, it's the employee, but like I said, the employee only gets $12,000. So if I'm going to have to pay extra, I would much rather pay extra on the employee than on the the fireman. But the part that's going to get us in trouble is $48,000 paying in, $28,000 collecting, towns, cities, state, reducing workforce. So for example, if the voters in Keene vote to pass the budget and they go in and eliminate 15 positions, okay? Well, if any of those positions, people are vested, it means they could go get a job someplace else, and they would join there's almost 1,400 people right now who are not working, not paying into the retirement system, but who are vested, and as soon as they turn the appropriate age, they'll be able to start collecting a check from the state of New Hampshire retirement fund. They would go in. But either way, those 15 positions are paying, they're part of this group paying for here. And what's happening is this number is going to go down and this number is going to go up. And like the firemen, 1.16 firemen for everyone that's collecting a retirement check. And then when you go and look at the cost of a fireman, more and more communities are going to have to do without firemen. And so each one of these funds are really kind of separate. So if we reduce the number of firemen to save money, there's less firemen to pay into. So the amount of money that the city and the firemen are going to have to pay to keep the fund, the retirement fund, in a position to pay out, is going to go higher and higher. And that's one of the problems that we have right now. 2 years ago, we said we were going to get 7.75% return, but we changed the rules and a couple of hundred people retired early. More than a few hundred people lost their jobs. Okay, so all of a sudden 500 people are no longer paying. 200 to 300 people who were never expected to retire are now collecting, and that's happening more and more. And there's one of the problems. It's how do we fund this when we're only at 56%? We're supposed to be at 70%, and because of the increased retirement costs, we have to get rid of more people. And that's the really frustrating part. It was preventable, and it still is preventable. We have to fix it. But what happened was, if we wanted to be honest, the towns, the cities, and the states got together and says, you know what, how do we balance our budget? You know what we'll do is we'll balance our budget by just projecting a great return on the the retirement, so we don't have to pay. Well, last year, 2 years ago, they expected 7.75% return. Okay, and since the state has to put their portion for the state employees in the state budget, what Mr. O'Brien and other ones did was, you know what, if we raise this number high, that means we have to pay very little into it. And so what we'll do is that means we'll have a smaller budget. So Mr. O'Brien can then go to the people and say, we as the Republicans, we reduced the rate of growth in the budget. Well, they didn't reduce the rate of growth. They put a bogus number in. And now, while they look good over the last 2 years, your tax bill coming up this December will not look good at all, because you're going to pay for that bogus number, because the real number, 0.9%. That was the real number. So that 7.75, which is an awful lot of money that was not put in, which was not paid by the state. Again, this is a backdoor of the state downshifting. The state did not only did the state cut off the amount of money that it was paying for, help paying for the local community's retirement fund, it backdoored it, kept their numbers low. So, for example, all those other employees, we in these communities have to pick up the state's portion. Okay, and this is what, for example, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year. 5-year, 1.8. When you go to the retirement fund, The return over the last 5 years was 1.8%. Over the last 10 years, 6.0%. Over the last 20 years, 7.8%. So how can someone in their right mind look at the people, the citizens of New Hampshire, with a straight face and say, hey, we're going to get a 7.75% return over the next 2 years? Wrong. It is unbelievably total bogus. If you've gone 20 years with a return average of 7.8% and you're in the middle of a recession or coming off one of the worst recessions, how do you go in and say, we're going to meet the 20-year average? Or we're going to be a little below the 20-year average? And no, it was just wrong. And this is what's happened. And here's again now, when we get ready to do the budget for this year, it's going to be really critical what number that we put in the budget this year for return on the state retirement fund. If we put a high number like that, that means the state won't have to put a lot of money to pay for their portion of the retirement fund. And in 2 years from now, the towns and the cities and the school districts will get hosed again, because 2 years from now, you ain't going to have much of return. 2 years from now, there's going to be more people collecting and less people paying. And that is how, for example, we've used a bunch of facts by themselves, but when you put all those facts together, you combine them or you put them in context, you can realize it wasn't very true. They weren't facts in the collective. They were facts in the singular, and we're suffering the consequences, and it's only going to get worse. And so what we really need to do is, we up in Concord, you as the voters need to go to your state legislators and say, put a real number in here. If you don't put a real number in here, the tax rate in Keene is going to go higher and higher and higher. And even with cuts at the school district, even cuts at the county, and even the city doing a really good job of keeping theirs low, you could very easily see $33, $34 tax rates 2 to 3 years from now if the state puts a bogus number here. And so that's the scary part. And that's how the retirement is, like I said last week, the retirement is the 5-ton angry bull elephant in the room, and there's not much space in the room, and the towns and the schools and the municipalities are getting trampled because the circus master, the state, does not want to do its job, does not want us to tell us the truth. We cannot afford these retirements rates, and we can only lay off so many people. We can only leave so many positions open, but we're not going to have any choice. If the state doesn't do it, the quality of services, the quality of education in the communities, and a lot of the communities in New Hampshire, is going to go down the toilet. So I'm going to go and take a quick break and put about I'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. And I'll be a little bit lighter side than this. And so there's the New Hampshire Retirement Fund. I don't know why we call it fun, but it's not very funny. Well, we're back, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some problems with the elderly, and I think we're going to take you a little place that I don't think you expect it to have to go to. But again, this is marrying up a number of different events and facts. There are 9 million elderly who are so poor that they qualify both for Medicaid and Medicare. Okay. Medicare is the one that you pay into as you work. You either get that by working or you get it through your spouse. Medicaid is are the ones for people who are extremely poor. It's like I said, 9 million elderly, which the elderly, they make up 20% of all Medicare population, but they cost the Medicare system $132 billion, or 31% of the annual Medicare budget. And so, and you go in and say poor, elderly and poor. Well, Social Security keeps a lot of elderly out of below the poverty line. But we still have a lot of women who never worked or worked very little. So when their spouse dies, they get spousal Social Security, and their amounts are extremely low. And so there's quite a few. So there's at least 9 million elderly people in the United States, and majority of them women, who are collecting Social Security, but at such a low rate, they're below the poverty level or just above the poverty level that they qualify for Medicaid along with their Medicare. This 9 million people make up 15% of the Medicaid population, but they cost Medicaid $129 billion, or 39%, or almost 40% of all the Medicare spending in the United States is spent on these 9 million people. And what happens is with Medicaid, which is extremely important, is the states have to pick up a portion of it. So when we go in and we look at the nursing home and saying the nursing home is running $3 to $4 million a year in the red, part of it is because you've got the individuals that get such low rates on Social Security, and they got paid Medicaid, and Medicaid has to pick up their costs. When my mother was in the nursing home, her Social Security check was only like $650 a month. She got her $50 a month, and the rest helped go pay for her room. Well, you have women out there only getting $200, $300 a month, and what happens is a lot of these nursing homes don't want to take them. And one of the things in New Hampshire is because you have county nursing homes, they find a way to, not the right term, but put it bluntly, find a way to dump them on the county home because it's easy for the county to pick up because the taxpayers have to pick up and cover the loss. And a lot of the nursing home says, I'm in the business of making money, not losing money, so they find a way. And believe it or not, almost 40%, basically 2 out of every 5 people 65 or older in the state of Maine, again, one of the oldest states in the country, are so poor that they qualify for not only with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I found this really shocking. I didn't realize there was so many people that elderly that were below the poverty level or just above that qualified. And so what I have right now, there's an article in Governing Magazine in the section, The Generations. And we talk about homeless, we talk about the 100-night shelter, and we talk about a whole bunch of other different homeless. It's easy, we can say, well, that individual, they're homeless, and why are they taking drugs, or why are they smoking, or why are they drinking? You know, if they were saving their money, they could find a place to live. Or why ain't they working? If they get off their butts and work, get a job, they wouldn't be homeless. And so when we see someone in their 20s or 30s or even 40s and they're homeless, we can always look the other way and say, you know what, there's a reason why they're homeless, and it's not our fault, the public's fault, it's their fault. We can go saying they're homeless because they're lazy. We don't want to look at the fact that one of the growing populations was children that were homeless, more and more homeless children. They were homeless as a result of a divorce or a downsizing. Or, for example, what happens in Peterborough where over 100 people lost their job 2 weeks ago. People that have been working at the company for decades. What are they going to do? Who's going to pay their mortgage? Who's going to pay their, where they're going to get their health care from? Who's going to pay their taxes? There's a whole bunch of things, and all of a sudden, you got families that are totally disruptive, and you have some families who may be on the borderline, and they may find themselves in bankruptcy court. And so, and I'm pretty sure a number of those people have children, and it's going to have a nasty effect on children. But what I found really surprising was the fastest growing population group of homeless population group is people 65 and older. And it's kind of like 65 and older. I just couldn't picture walking down the street in Keene or someplace and see someone 65 or 70 years old homeless on the street. And Senior Intervention Group, a coalition of not-for-profit organizations and businesses dedicating to ensure that the county's older population does not get lost behind closed doors in poverty and neglect. I went to the home of a mother who was in her 90s living with her daughter who was in her 70s, and they had no electricity and very little food. They were cutting pills in half to save money. We have 100,000 people turning 65 every day, and the fastest growing segment of homeless are among the elderly. Can you imagine being 85 years old and homeless? The factors set up an interesting tension when it comes to the study of aging in the United States. On the one hand, there has been a considerable amount of work on how to make communities more livable and friendly for the elderly, how streetscapes, co-housing, public transportation, food supply, recreation centers, and so forth can all be blended to make for a rich and positive aging experience. Less attention is being paid to the darker side of aging. Many elderly are ill-prepared to shoulder the cost of retirement and have gaps between what seniors need to live on vice what they might have landed squarely on state and local governments. And what's happened is a lot of people, if you're depending on Social Security, it isn't going to cover. One of the problems that we have right now in Keene, plain and simple, I've talked to some people. If you have a $200,000 house in Keene, even if it's all paid for, you still got to pay $6,000 a year in property taxes. Okay, you put water, you put sewage, you put some heat on, and all of a sudden, well, if you're only making $18,000 to $22,000 a year on Social Security and $6,000 goes right to property tax, then you got the other stuff. All of a sudden, there ain't very much for food, there ain't very much for medicine, and that's if you're a couple. Now, what happens if you're a widow and you're maybe getting $13,000, $14,000, and all of a sudden $6,000 goes? Or even if you get a $100,000 house, that's $3,000. Yes, you can get, there's different ways, abatements and other stuff that the city of Keene can do, and it does pretty well to help you stay in the house. But the thing is, I got fuel the other day, $3.98 a gallon. And so for $100 gallons, I wrote a check for $400. Now, what happens if I was elderly? I would not, and living on Social Security, I would not be able to write a check for $400. I couldn't pre-buy 1,000 gallons of oil, even 500 gallons. 500 gallons of oil is between $1,500 and $1,800 for the pre-buy. Where are some of the people 65 and older going to get that money to do it? And so, Keene, on one case, we've got a lot of elderly retirees who are pretty well off. But like I said, on the Docker side, we have an awful lot of elderly in Keene who are not very well off, and they're hurting. And it's going to become more and more of a problem. The Elderly Economic Index says the index looks at the cost of independent living for elderly, including their household size, their health status, geographic location, and whether they rent or own their home. Then it uses that data to calculate the level of income necessary to support an independent, age-in-place lifestyle. And so, according to the American Medical Association website, by age 65, 2/3 of Americans will have at least one chronic disease and will be seeing 7 different doctors. A fifth of elders, 20%, will have 5 or more chronic disease and will be tangled up with 14 doctors. The second bottom line is that a huge proportion of our rapidly aging population simply isn't going to have the financial resources to live out their life in independent comfort and security. If you're 65, 20% of people 65 and older have 5 or more chronic diseases, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, to name a few, and they can be seen anywhere between 7 to 14 doctors. Medicaid and Medicare doesn't pay for everything. So where's that money coming from? And so where you're going to live, there is only so much housing for the elderly. You're not going to be able to live in your own home because you're not going to afford it. AARP has documented an alarming increase in home foreclosures among those over age 50, with 2011 witnessing 1.5 million of them, a 23% increase since 2007. So in 2011, 1.5 million house people over 50 lost their house to foreclosure. If you've been using your house as savings for the future and you lose it while you're in your 50 or older, who pays for your future? What is your future? There is a simple, fundamental reason for the looming economic insecurity among elderly. They haven't saved enough money. It's a very bleak picture, says Alicia Mundell, director of the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College. According to the latest data, said Mundell, people aged 55 to 64 have approximately $120,000 total on which to retire. You can't imagine how long that's going to last. And I don't know if we'll try this. We'll put this together. Every place that's red on this map has greater than 30% of their population 65 or older. And you can see all the Northeast, it's all 65, a lot of it's 65 and older. And so I think that's what we need to look at. What can we do to prevent this from becoming a serious problem in Keene? We can't afford, and we just don't want to have homeless people on our streets. We don't want to see grandma and grandpa or great-grandma or grandma homeless because they just can't afford to live. We can do better than that as a society. We have to do better than that as a society. And the state has to do its job so we as a city can take care of our citizens. And so I hope that you like the new introduction, and I will see you on the long road next week.